All right, guys. I know I had you read this section of this textbook that I posted, but I just wanted to go over this a little bit with you guys, just in case you weren't exactly sure what you should be taking away from it, or what are the key points that I'm really looking at for you to focus on. So, at the beginning of the chapter, these learning objectives really point to what it is you should be taking away. And um, what I really kind of wanted to talk about, excuse me, in this video are three things. First of all, I want to talk about how going into speeches, you should be considering and analyzing the audience that you are speaking to. And then once we go through the process of, the purpose of our speech and speech topics, the other two things we really want to focus on are, again, what the purpose of your speech is, so what you're trying to accomplish with it, and then composing a thesis statement for it. All right. So once we talk about the purpose of the speech, you'll have a purpose statement and a thesis statement. Okay. So first of all, want to talk about your audience. Okay, because when you are public speaking, this is who you're doing it for. I mean, if you're just going to present information, you could do that in like an essay or a report, but when you know that you are having to speak on a topic, it is really the audience that is the most important part of what you are doing. Since you are students at Pacelli and you are primarily seniors, a couple juniors, you might think that audience analysis isn't that important because you are all pretty much the same, but the writer of this textbook kind of talks about how you can still consider your audience even though they all might be similar people. So this person who wrote it has experience with teaching, and they say, you can't assume from looking that everyone in your audience is the same age, race, sexual orientation, religion, or many other factors. Even if you have a fairly homogenous audience, that means even if your audience seems like they are all very similar people with maybe one or two that don't kind of fit the mold, you still need to consider those one or two people. All right. The last thing you want to do when you are speaking is alienate anybody. All right. So, you still need to keep, the odd man out or odd people out in your audience in your mind as you do it. Okay? So, even if every single person in your classroom is, 17 or 18, young, even if they might all be something like, middle class, which not everybody in Pacelli is, there's still differences of experiences, difference of backgrounds, difference of beliefs that you need to keep in mind. All right, and so these categories that people fit in: age, gender, race, socioeconomic status, which is, the money status that people live in. These are the demographics, and you need to consider the demographics. Okay. I personally, I mean, Lindsay Candy, believe, not saying that this is the only way to go about this, but that the psychological audience analysis is more important. I mean, there are times when you won't be able to do a thorough psychological audience analysis of your audience. So let's say you're having a business meeting, you haven't met the people who are maybe conferencing in on this yet, so you don't know what to expect from them. So, you take a quick look at the visible, sort of diversity that might be there in your group, different genders or races or, positions within the company. You might be able to figure that out. But if you can get a psychological analysis, that is also vitally important. So, first thing that is included in a psychological audience analysis is figuring out what your audience's attitudes, beliefs, and values might be. First and easiest thing to do is the attitudes. All right. So, for example, imagine you are a teacher, right? And you are an English teacher, and you know that there are kids in your class that disdain reading, they haven't read a book since like middle school, they think it's useless, all right? An English teacher needs to keep those attitudes in mind and adjust the lesson um, appropriately. So the way I would teach, freshman English with everybody because they're forced to take that class is very different from how maybe Mr. Gehrman would teach something like AP English or advanced writing because people are electing to take that class and might have more of an interest. All right, same thing with whatever speech you are giving. Particularly if the speech you are giving is going to be or could potentially be controversial. All right. So this paragraph here talks about what sort of changes or small modifications you could make in several different examples. All right. The first way to get the audience, no matter the demographics, to engage with you, first of all, is to establish some credibility, right? And that's not saying that you need to have a degree in what you're talking about, but most importantly, you are competent, you are trustworthy, and you are engaging, right? So as far as this class in Pacelli goes, your classmates might know you are already, or they're already familiar with you, so they might already see you as a credible speaker, right? Or might see you as somebody who knows a lot or is passionate about whatever you're speaking about. All right. But in order to doubly establish that competency, you also need to really work on that trustworthiness. So that's when incorporating supporting materials, verbally citing your sources, presenting informations and arguments in a balanced, non-coercive, and non-manipulative way. All right. So if some of you are really interested in, politics or news journalism or something, you might want to be careful about using some of the tactics that they might use in public because it's, they do alienate their audience a bit, and they alienate sort of the other side, and you don't want to do that. All right. So it's kind of like that etiquette thing where you still want to maintain your argument if you are making an argument while also being welcoming and inviting to people who may not share the attitudes and beliefs that you do. Right? They talk about captive audiences. They do say that having a voluntary audience, so people that elect to come and see you speak, is always the best thing to have because, they're already bought into whatever you're wanting to say. All right. An involuntary audience is always going to be a little bit of a tougher crowd. And I will tell you that, this is a school class. Your audience isn't exactly voluntary, right? But I really do want to highlight this circle graph here. And it says we can think of our attitudes, beliefs, and values as layers that make up our perception and knowledge. So everything that you do sort of perceive and integrate within yourself, it's kind of like this layer here. So at the very core of you, you have things that you value, and then it's surrounded by the things that you have come to believe, and then at the outermost level, attitudes are likes and dislikes. They're more on the surface thing. They're more easy to influence. So, because one day, you might like a particular kind of music, and then, a few weeks down the road, you might not like that particular type of music. All right. But beliefs and values, they are harder to scratch at. Some people can change their beliefs, especially as they grow older, more informed, or whatever it is. But it's really hard to change the things that you value. Okay. So this is like the core of yourself, the things that really you don't want to flex on, and then as you go on the outside you can be a little more flexible with those things, but they're still hard to influence. All right. I'm going to skip over a bunch of this stuff. Okay, now we get to the actual creating the speech itself. And there's two things that look similar, but they are different. Okay, so first thing, when you get to planning and prepping a speech, you have to figure out what your purpose is. And I'm going to take you back, because this is a very teachery thing, and we have to do this all the time, but it's very close to those purposes. A general purpose is, what are you hoping to accomplish with your speech? Or what do you hope an outcome of the speech is? All right. So one thing that teachers have is what is called a SWBAT, and that's SWBAT. And that's kind of like our purpose statement, and it stands for students will be able to whatever, right? You're going to have the same thing when you're prepping a speech. My audience will be able to, all right? So at the very sort of top level, the general purpose is like to inform or to persuade, to entertain, all right? But you have to know kind of what you're doing with that, all right? They give some examples down here as to what types of speeches can be placed into those purposes. So my goal is to inform people about the civil rights movement, to inform them about renewable energy, to inform them about reality television. My purpose is to persuade people to, support gun control, to persuade people that about privacy rights, to persuade people that prison needs reformation and how it's run. Otherwise, if you're doing some, like a comedic monologue, My Craziest Adventure, a roast, or maybe like a retirement speech or even like a graduation speech, that would be to entertain type of thing. But you can even be a little more specific than that. You could say something along the lines of, the general purpose of my speech is to change my audience, or change the majority of my audience's mind so that they support changing the start of the school day. All right. You could even say something like, the general purpose of my speech is to enact people to donate money to the American Cancer Society or whatever. Okay. But at the very first step, you need to figure out, are you informing, are you persuading, are you entertaining, or is there even a fourth option that you're looking at? Once you've decided what you want to do or what your assignment is telling you to do, then you're choosing your topic. It talks about brainstorming. Okay, you guys have done that before. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. So the general purpose, to inform, to persuade, to entertain. And then once you have your general purpose and a brainstorm, then you can get a specific purpose, and that's like the SWBAT statement, the one sentence statements that includes the objective. All right, I'm sorry, I misspoke before. All right. Key to a specific purpose is having it be audience centered. All right, so my audience or the audience, like and they have an example down here, by the end of my speech, the audience will be better informed about the effects the green movement has had on schools. Right? So that's, my audience will be able to be better informed about the effects of the green movement. Okay. That is the audience-centered statement. And then once you have that, then you write a thesis statement. Okay. And it's pretty similar, but not exactly. I mean, you guys should be fairly familiar with thesis statements since you've been writing them for 3 or 4 years across multiple papers. All right. And your thesis statement, as far as the speech goes, it's the central idea you're either explaining or the central idea you're defending. So when I took an intro level communications course in college, my general purpose was to persuade, and my specific purpose was to convince audience members that smoking should be illegal. So then my thesis statement would be something like, smoking should be made illegal in the United States, or whatever have you.